Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of Empowering Musicians podcast. I'm your host, Michael Manley, and today we're going to be celebrating all things John Williams. And I've got my Star Wars t-shirt on for the occasion, which you can see here. And I have a special guest, my friend Wages Argot, who is a fellow musician and former touring musician as well, and a lover of film music and John Williams. So welcome, Wages.
Great to be here. Thanks so much for having me. Any opportunity to talk about John Williams, sign me up.
Awesome. So just make sure you unmute when you're talking. I think you are, though, so because I heard you. So I noticed your mute button going on and off. So my connection, I'll start with my connection. So my connection to John Williams was that I was 11 when Star Wars came out, and I was playing trumpet in middle school band, and somehow I wasn't that excited about the trumpet. And I had been to see Star Wars, and like any 11-year-old kid, was really blown away. And my band director at school was like, we need French horn players. And I was like, what's that? And he showed it to me, and it looked weird. It was like this kind of snail-like looking contraption. And then I made a note on it, and I realized, oh, wait, this is the Star Wars instrument. I associated it with like the Force theme and all these things. And somehow, although trumpet was all over Star Wars as well, I didn't get excited about that. But I got really excited about the French horn. So that's how I got started. And that was sort of like, I never looked back, really. And that was kind of my intro to music, really. It was my window. And then I noticed that there was some other films coming out around the same time. Jaws, of course, was the big film that really put John Williams on the map in a way that he hadn't been, right? It was kind of the first film where people were humming the tune outside of the movie, and they really associated it with a specific moment in a film. And there was another film called The Deep that came out that was another Peter Benchley book. And there was this great music that was going on in the beginning, and I looked it up and I realized it was a piece by Richard Strauss called Unheldenleben. And so I got into classical music through film music. I discovered Wagner, I discovered Strauss, I discovered all these people, but it was because of John Williams. So tell us a little bit about your journey with film music, specifically in the trumpet.
Yeah, not that dissimilar. So I grew up in the 1980s, which of course was the heyday of a lot of really great science fiction and fantasy films with a lot of really great composers, John Williams sort of being the one leading that charge through there with his association with Steven Spielberg and George Lucas, of course. And I think it's funny, kind of examining the body of work there. It's like any one of the one sort of major IPs that we sort of associate John Williams with would have made him iconic. And yet somehow across all of these, he had, involvement with all these, famous individual properties where you might not even have fans of the same thing. You got your Harry Potter fans, your Home Alone fans, Star Wars, Superman. Anyway, I was into all of that growing up. So really coming to music probably was more, after the fact. I had a relationship with those films, and probably contextual. I probably enjoyed the music just because I liked the film so much, like any child would. And then I had that day in the 5th grade when then the music teachers come in and let you try out the various instruments. And I don't even know why I had an interest in doing that at all. I loved listening to music, imbibing it, but not necessarily making it. But that day I felt sort of, I guess, inspired to try. I thought I was going to be a saxophone player. And fortunately for me, I couldn't make a sound on the instrument. I tried really hard, but nothing came out. So they steered me away from that quickly. Trumpet and trombone were the ones that worked. I guess maybe trumpet won because it was smaller and probably less expensive. So, but again, no musicians in the family. There really wasn't any great reason for my doing it. And I wasn't very good either. I really sounded bad. I wasn't a good student, not particularly, natural on that instrument, even getting just a decent tone. So for whatever reason, I stuck with it. And, I had some friends that kind of pushed me. And then And then I realized how much I enjoyed actually being able to make some of those sounds and play some of those pieces at an early age in middle school. You can generally play some sort of simplified versions of a lot of the John Williams stuff. And of course, as a trumpet player, most of that music that I had the experience with early on, which would have been your Supermans and your Star Wars and Raiders of the Lost Ark, trumpet is so much in the front there with Maurice Murphy leading the charge in the London Symphony Orchestra and everything, right? So uh, I was very excited to move on to that and, continue to play and grow, and realized at some point that I would have liked to have made music a vocation, just because I continued to improve and got to play outside of the confines of the school band when you'd go to the honors bands and things. And then it would be all of the better students and you get to play more and more music, right?
Temporarily.
So,
There you are. Okay. Sorry. I had a glitch in the matrix over here, but continue. Sorry.
no worries. So I actually, in going off to college, my first major was music technology, because at that time that was sort of the closest thing that the school had to a major that would have led to like a film scoring career, right? Like that's kind of what was working. We were doing a lot of different things with some of the emerging technologies for recording and multi-track things, and a lot of the electronic music and that sort of thing as well, which for me was great because it allowed me to write some things and have some full orchestral sounds without actually having all those musicians at my disposal. But at the beginning of my sort of musical journey, I was a real synth snob too. As I've grown in my film music journey, I've grown to kind of appreciate what certain composers have done with synthesizers, but early on it was always we're replacing our musicians with synths that sound like that, but really that's not the case. And I, even John Williams used some of that stuff, and maybe we'll get into that a little bit later effectively. But all throughout all this, even thinking when I was going to be a film composer vocationally, I started to become a huge film score hobbyist. There were a lot of composers outside of Williams. Williams is still probably my top. I think I have around 150 John Williams scores of different kinds and over 2,000 film scores total on physical media anyway. So I do have a lot of that stuff around, and just really imbibing as much of it as I possibly can. And there's some really interesting stuff out there, especially even just in Williams kind of history and all the eras that he's spanned. And I'm sure we'll probably get into that a little bit later too, and kind of his evolution and background and everything. But yeah, I stuck with that. I didn't wind up shifting into the compositional side like I thought I would. Actually, after college, I was out of music for a couple of years, and I realized at some point when I had become sort of a weekend warrior that music was the thing that I wanted to do full time. So I just basically went to all the music job sites I could find and trying to see what was out there, what was something that could give me a full-time job as a musician that wasn't teaching. No disrespect to our educators, but I wanted to play. And the first job that I saw that really seemed viable was the Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus. So I applied and auditioned, won that job, and spent the next 12 years as a trumpet player and then later band leader for the traveling circus. Did about 400 shows a year playing trumpet. And the really fun thing about doing the Ringling show is, one, the music for that show, at least in the structure that it currently is, it's not all marches and rags and things like that like you'd expect from the old days. It's really programmed music with specific beats and hits. It's very much like playing a live film score, like live to film, except you don't know what's coming, right? You have a plan, but you don't always know. So not only did I have that, really, kind of exciting way to sort of express my love of film music vocationally, but the composers that we used on Ringling were all bona fide film composers. The first one I worked with was Craig Safan, who at that time, the main thing I knew him for was composing The Last Starfighter, which was a really great 80s film with a big, rousing, very brassy, exciting sci-fi score. He did a lot of other things too, a lot of subtle stuff. For years, he was the staff composer for Cheers. That was probably one thing that you would have seen his name most, but he did a lot of great films, and I got to work very closely with him. And throughout the years, we would get different fresh composers every couple of years. I got to work with some folks like Jim Dooley, who came up under Hans Zimmer and is an Emmy winner for Pushing Daisies, and just recently did Series of Unfortunate Events on Netflix. Great film composer. And Michael Picton, who has also done television work. He did the Flash Gordon series recently, so he has that kind of sci-fi fantasy pedigree as well. So, I was very fortunate to get to work with those. And now, of course, I landed as a freelance musician in New York City. Film music is as near and dear to my heart as it ever was. I continue to amass a huge collection of film scores and continue to listen, and hear how that's evolved. But yeah, that's kind of my journey in a nutshell. But film music is really it's definitely where things started. It was the catalyst, and it's driven me the whole way, and it's still very much my passion. So
that's great. Before we continue, I just wanted to acknowledge we've got some comments. What's up, Mike and Wages? I just see Facebook user as the poster, and I can't respond to the comments for whatever reason the way this is set up. So glad you're watching. I feel free to identify yourselves. Asha's watching us, and I see perfect person to interview for this topic, another Facebook user. So if you want to identify yourselves in the comments, we'd love to know who's watching. It's a little bit hard to tell from here. So thanks for your comments. Thanks for watching. So yeah, I think one thing that I think is interesting about the circus and film, there's really three genres, I think, that Americans invented as far as orchestral music. And art music, if you will, right? And one is musical theater, the other is film scores, and the other is the circus, right? The circus led to a whole genre of music that was specific to the circus, mostly the famous marches we all know. And so it's interesting that you're connected to all three of those in some ways, because you also sub on Broadway, right?
Right.
At times. So this is a great conversation. I was just thinking about John Williams in particular and his legacy, right? So you mentioned synthesized music, and there have been these kind of like these fads, I'd say, these like moments in time. Like there was that synthesizer moment in maybe the 70s, 80s, I want to say. Like you have Vangelis winning the Oscar for Chariots of Fire, and his music is great, but it's specific, and it didn't influence like 100 other composers in a way. Although I love his music, and somehow John Williams has made his mark and kept his own identity as a composer for like 50 years, which is amazing to me. And one of the things that you have to be as a film composer is extremely versatile. And Williams, people don't realize how versatile he is. Like the person who wrote Catch Me If You Can also wrote Schindler's List, right? But I was just doing some research, and I was looking at the 10 years between starting in 75, and this is release dates, right? So Jaws was released in 75. Between 1975 and 1985, not only did John Williams write these amazing scores, but he also worked with some of the world's most amazing directors, right? So these are just the highlights of that 10-year period, right? So we have Jaws, Steven Spielberg. We have Family Plot, Alfred Hitchcock's last film, also the same year as Jaws. We have Arthur Penn's Missouri Breaks. We have Star Wars and Close Encounters in the same year. We have one of my favorite movies, Brian De Palma's The Fury. Do you know that score?
Oh yeah, very well. Yeah,
a great score. And then Superman, and then 1941, then Empire Strikes Back, then Indiana Jones, E.T., Jedi, and Temple of Doom. That's in one 10-year period, right? I mean, it's just staggering when you think of not only just the output, and you think about output and you think, well, it's not all going to be great, but in a way, it's all great. And so I think that's part of the genius of John Williams, is just that there's no dud in the mix, as far as I know. And, just in that 10-year period, coming up with all of those, that body of work that is so iconic is just amazing to me. Do you have any favorite John Williams scores or works or, I guess, tracks?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I have answers to all of those, and it's funny because I remember I think I was in the 7th grade in middle school, and we were doing some kind of class exercise, and get to know you. And one of the answers was write your favorite song. And I wrote for my favorite song, "The Banquet" by John Williams from the Hook score, which I think was 1991. And I think looking back on that, it's so funny, and I was so proud of that. And I think Hook is one of those scores that's really stuck with me. There's some really beautiful thematic stuff going on there, but a lot of that really kind of great swashbuckling sort of idea that you can really hear the Korngold influence and that sort of thing with the Errol Flynn films and all, which a lot of what Williams does, and I think Williams has a great educational pedigree, right? Like, he started as a jazz pianist and did all kinds of different work, studied at Juilliard, studied composition at UCLA, and but you can tell that at some point, whether it was there or not initially, that when he was called to do something, he probably studied folks who had done that very well, right? And I know a lot of people really like to pick apart Williams' music and say, no, this is just from this. But in that case, I mean, all of us as musicians and composers do that. We go to who we perceive as the experts in that thing to get ideas and to get the proper sound and all. But it's for me, it's led to finding a lot of other composers, to tie it back to sort of being a gateway to symphonic orchestral music as a whole. And I learned about a lot of composers, both the early film composers and their inspirations, the outside of film composers. And, it's probably worth mentioning too, that there was a bridge there when you had a lot of your really respected concert hall composers like Prokofiev and Copland and Shostakovich and folks like that who actually wrote music for film. And I don't think people realize that all the time.
Yeah.
And that was all part of the natural evolution that got us to John Williams. And, it's odd because I think that while he is arguably the most famous composer of orchestral music, you do find that sometimes, and we mentioned this in a previous conversation, that a lot of that music isn't appreciated on the same level as some of our other concert works and is rather relegated into kind of a pop's bucket. So, but that's just a matter of opinion. And I think musicians who have had the opportunity to really dive into that music or perform it realize just what a high level of composition that really is with John Williams, and how complex and interesting that music can be.
Yeah, I think it's also like the explanation I have for that, at least my theory, is that it's like cultural bias that comes from Europe, right? Like nobody would say we shouldn't play the Firebird because it was just a ballet. They wouldn't say we shouldn't play Rite of Spring because that was just a backup music for a bunch of dancers, right? We play that music because it's great music, but we don't have that same attitude about film music. We think, oh, it's just film music, or it's just video game music, or it's just a TV score. When, as you're right, it's like legitimate, and it's also legitimately hard, right? Like, so if you play the music, and this happens too often, I think, if you play the music with not the right size orchestra and you don't rehearse it enough, it kind of sounds like crap if you're not careful, because it's incredibly difficult music to perform and to pull off. And people they think because it's popular, it's somehow easy, and it's actually not at all easy. So I have a theory that I'm going to test with you, and I brought my horn with me just to give you all a trigger warning. I'm going to play some notes. Don't judge. So I have this theory that that 3 of the 3 Alien movies, Close Encounters, Star Wars, and E.T., are all the same theme, right? The same kind of like cantus firmus, if you will. And so I'm going to show you what I mean. And maybe this is entirely obvious, or maybe this is going to blow your mind. I really don't know yet. So here we go. So here's Star Wars, right? Right? So, and here's E.T. Right? So, if we leave out the third and play the 2 notes in the lower octave, it's the same theme, right? It's Star Wars. And then if we go to the end of the E.T. theme,
And there's your Close Encounters.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. Some people might not get impressed by that. I find that amazing. And I think this is part of the genius of John Williams, is that he thinks in this way there, where he can use the same notes, but have completely distinctive and different emotions and associations. Right? We wouldn't necessarily confuse any of these themes ever, but they're all from the same clay. It's kind of cool.
It does make you wonder, and I think even Brian Williams asked John Williams this question once in an interview, that if John Williams maybe, at least on some subconscious level, like cracks some kind of code, like this sort of aural sequence or something here triggers a specific emotion, or somehow gets to that gooey center of your brain or your heartstrings better than something else. I dissected that in a college paper one time with Williams and some other folks, but to think that so many, again, like you said, kind of unrelated things have become so iconic and have imprinted on folks so much. It's just staggering that they would all come from one individual, and yet no one's running around saying, well, he just writes the same thing over and over again, which is very much not the case, so.
Yeah. And, the thing that he was doing with Star Wars, which was my window again into this a whole other world, was he's doing what grand opera and romantic opera were doing, right? This is really was really developed and perfected by Richard Wagner, right? The idea of a piece of music or a snippet, or in German we call it a leitmotif, was associated with one character or one theme or one emotion. So in Wagner's Ring Cycle, you have a theme that's associated with the gold in the Rhine River. You have one that's associated with the long staff, which symbolizes an oath. You have Siegfried's theme, and all these themes that we associate with these characters. And that's really what John Williams was doing. He was creating an opera with Star Wars, where we have these themes that are associated with Yoda, with Princess Leia, with Luke Skywalker, with the Force. So, what he was doing was kind of presenting this European style grand opera, but in an American genre of film. And I think that's part of his genius as well, is the idea that he can create these moments that we associate so indelibly with certain characters and themes and emotions,
And I think what's really great about Williams' music too is that, we do have all these iconic themes, these things that have stuck with us, not only helped in the storytelling, but we took away after we watched the film. And all of these things, for me at least as a listener, really stand alone. You can listen to them out of context and, not only enjoy them as you did in the film, but, find new textures and nuances where, not to criticize today's film composers, but I do feel like a lot of the music that I hear accompanying a lot of, current content, it stands on its own a little less. It's not so listenable. Again, a lot of it's atmospheric, and that's very effective in the context of what film music is intended to do. But like you said, John Williams is writing these grand operas, and whether it's accompanying, lasers and Harrison Ford, or you're just sitting at your home listening on your hi-fi, it just works, and every time it's effective. So.
Yeah, I think that's a big distinction, because I do find that as well. Like today, I just find a lot of the scores are their background, they're atmospheric, right? It's a sound effect. It's kind of like a mood, but it's not music that I would listen to on its own necessarily. And I think I don't know if that has to do with the directors and their taste or what that's coming from, but you're right. All this music stands up on its own. And I remember, at the Academy Awards, they always do an in memorials for people that passed on that year. They put everybody's picture on the screen, and there's always a beautiful piece of music playing underneath that the amazing orchestra they put together for the Oscars always plays. And one year they did their in memorial, and they're playing this, like, it's just the most gorgeous piece of music that is just really reflective and beautiful and kind of sad and mournful. And it's from Superman, right? Like nobody would know that, but like that score was, or that track was from Superman. And all of these scores have, just so much in them that is of every mood. And we think of Superman as the opening fanfare, but there's so much great music within just that score. And, we're not even getting into after this 10-year period that I highlighted, we've got Jurassic Park, we've got Empire of the Sun, we've got Schindler's List, of course. I mean, it just goes on. Have you ever had a chance to meet John Williams?
No, I've never met him. Not for not trying, but in fact, I think the only time we were in a room together was 1998. I was overseas in Birmingham, England, performing with a group, and the London Symphony Orchestra was in town, conducted by John Williams, performing a concert of his music. And I tried very hard to get close to the stage after the concert was over, to meet, but never did. But you know, I'm very grateful that I at least got to see conducting that group doing his music at least the one time. And I think, you know, that's what, 24 years ago now. How of the music between now and then I would have loved to have heard performed by that group, but of course that was the majority of the focus. There was the stuff again that we've kind of discussed, the sort of the big grand things that he's known all time for. But you mentioned it, going through the different eras. You know, if you talk to people, I feel like if you go down the street, 9 out of 10 people are going to know who John Williams is. They're going to associate him with something. But everybody's John Williams is different. You know, was yours John Williams the Irwin Allen? I mean, did you watch Lost in Space, Land of the Giants? You know, the disaster films, Poseidon Adventure? Is it the Star Wars, E.T., Raiders? Is it the Jurassic Park, Hook? You know, that Schindler's List? Is it, you know, into the 2000s? You know, he's starting to do some more subtle things, and you know, the more recent Star Wars films. You know, some people may have jumped on when the prequels came out, which I thought the best thing about those prequel films were the scores. And you know, every time I listen to them, I'll just have to pause it, and whoever in the room, I'm saying, man, nobody told John Williams that these films were kind of dogs. No offense to anyone, but he put every bit of, you know, effort and energy and magic into that as he did for anything else he'd ever done. Those scores are incredible for those prequel films, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you. It's almost better to watch them with your eyes closed. But and also Harry Potter. There's a whole Harry Potter world, and Home Alone, and all this. But and I think that what's fascinating and what's really fortunate, and this is really, I think, hard to do, right, because of the way Hollywood works and the way everything works. It's not automatic, right? But somehow John Williams was engaged to score every single Star Wars movie, right? Like, that's not the case with Harry Potter. Like, he scored 1 or 2, and then other people came in. And Jurassic Park, I think, same thing, right? The later ones. And so it's almost like, again, if you compare it to something monumental like Wagner's 4-opera Ring Cycle, which is probably like 17 and a half hours worth of music end to end. I mean, all 9 Star Wars movies are, I think it's like 27 hours of music or something. It's crazy. And it's an amazing accomplishment when you think about it. And you know, there's just this grand monumental kind of like opera in a way.
Which is what you want, because you want the same person 40 years later to be hearkening back to what he did previously and tie that all in. I mean, you know, that last film, unfortunately, was sort of beautiful to me, but like, you're all in the audience realize that this is the last time that you're going to have some of these actors on screen in roles, you know, with John Williams at the helm, you know, with this music and these characters. And some of that music, even though it's new to my heart, is very emotional, because that's the end of a journey. And there were some folks who were there for the entire journey. You know, some of those actors and filmmakers and everyone who was involved, but especially that John Williams music, and having him, you know, reorchestrate and have new players play his music and everything and introduce it to a new audience. Because I don't know if you've spent much time with that last score, but it's a jukebox of all of the great themes from all 9 of the films. You know, it's really fantastic. And then a new theme that he wrote that just really brings a tear to my eye, especially with some of the prominent deaths for some of those actors that have happened, you know, while all the films are going on. Because, you know, that was a great classic good versus evil story where we don't have one of these sort of, at least for most of it, a really flawed main character who may be a villain, might be a good guy, you don't know. You know, yeah. It's something where we really had definitive, we're rooting for this side, you know, and across that 40 years, people got to grow up to that, and then, you know, pass that on to their their offspring and everything as well. So, and to think that Williams, and he's got this new Indiana Jones film coming up as well, which I'm sure is going to be a similar feel for everyone too. So.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I just want to acknowledge Bill Leary's watching. Thanks, Bill. And we got some other people checking out the show and posting. So perfect person to interview for this topic. I couldn't agree more. And so glad to have you with us today. Yeah, I think the last two films are there. There's an Indiana Jones film. There's also a kind of an autobiographical film called The Fabelmans is coming out. I think it's called The Fabelmans. Which John Williams also scored. Do you have any favorite obscure John Williams scores that people may not know?
Yeah, I've got a handful, and I feel like I'm discovering new ones all the time. There's this really quirky sort of robot kind of love story film with Andy Kaufman and Bernadette Peters called Heartbeats. You ever heard of that one?
I remember it was kind of a flop when it came out, and I remember seeing it on the list when I was doing some research, and I thought, wow, I wonder what that's like.
It's I can't say that I've even seen the film, and I might just keep it that way, maybe as an academic study. I'm introduced to so many scores by really just picking up the album first and listening to it. And, there's part of me that wants to do the academic study of sitting down and seeing what was happening in the context of the film. But then there's part of it that's thinking, well, I've created this image in my mind. This is in this positive place. Do I want to leave it there, or do I want to, have a chance that it might be somewhat tarnished by the action on the film? So, but yeah, that one's definitely up there. That family plot that you mentioned, which I think was kind of an oddball Hitchcock film, but the score is very interesting.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people don't realize too that John Williams' first Academy Award that he won was for the work that he did on The Fiddler on the Roof.
Right.
Motion picture.
Adapting that score. Yeah.
Yeah, which for me, the first musical theater that I ever did was a production of Fiddler on the Roof in high school, which I'm sure we had a very fine orchestra, but my prep was listening to the John Williams record, that had like that gigantic orchestra and everything. To go back down to our tiny ensemble, was very different. And that kind of thing has forever tainted me on listening to like the movie version of a musical theater soundtrack as opposed to what's happening, in the theater. It's very, very much a distance there. But
yeah, that's funny. Nathan Slaybaugh says, I love his score for Always. Always is a really overlooked film. I mean, it's kind of sugary and a little bit over the top, but it does have Audrey Hepburn in it. I think an older Audrey Hepburn and Holly Hunter, and it's got a great, beautiful score also. I think my favorite kind of unknown or underappreciated John Williams score would have to be AI, which is a film that I love. Most people hate that movie, but I actually really love the movie. And I just think it has some amazing themes in it. At one point, he kind of one thing that he does, which is really interesting, is that he has interpolated other themes and of other composers and other songs into his scores, and he actually references the waltz from Strauss's Der Rosenkavalier in the score from AI at one moment, and there's the famous scene at the end of Close Encounters. And Close Encounters, I think my favorite is the original. There's an extended version. There's a director's cut and a special edition, right? I think the original is still the best. But if you watch the special edition, at the end, when they're inside the spaceship, When You Wish Upon a Star is kind of referenced, which I think is a really gorgeous from a scoring perspective. And I think the interesting part about that film was Steven Spielberg never wanted to show the inside of the spaceship, and so I think that he made the film the way he did. But then it was successful, and the studio said, "Well, we're going to give you some more money to make it even more, more pump it up and pump up the aliens." And they kind of wanted him to go inside the spaceship, which I think is a mistake. But I think he was kind of forced to do it by the studio. But anyway, gorgeous score. I think it's one of the moments where a theme, the Close Encounters, the 5-note theme, actually is almost a character in the film. It's so associated with that movie, and how he could come up with something like that is kind of genius. And again, it's the ET theme and the Star Wars theme.
I mean, I'll give you logically, those were all pretty close together. So it's okay to maybe put that in the perspective that maybe that was a part of his career phase. But again, John Williams seems to have somehow reinvented himself so many times over the years, and yet maintain that high level. And whatever that intangible factor is, has made his music so memorable and iconic throughout all that time as well. I go back, and mostly when I listen to music, I very rarely now just sit down and listen to an album from top to bottom. So I just go through the shuffle, and every once in a while something will just come on. Like a couple of days ago, I was listening to the Stanley and Iris score by John Williams, and it's beautiful, and I don't know if a lot of folks spend time on that. Certainly the film score aficionados do, and I spend some time in that world on the message boards and that sort of thing. But there are a lot of films like that. Sabrina, the remake with Harrison Ford and Julia Ormond and Greg Kinnear, that he did the score for. This movie Stepmom with Julia Roberts, The Accidental Tourist, things like that really, you hear Williams' voice in all these scores, even without that big sort of iconic brass fanfare sort of thing that you're so and that's what's so great about him. He can physically deck you with the music sometimes, but he can really just pull you by the heart too. But he knocks you down every time, and that's what I love about John Williams.
Yeah, and I like the fact that he can do that. But even in places where it's not necessary, like you wouldn't expect it, right? Like you wouldn't expect really beautiful, gorgeous, romantic music in Superman or in Jurassic Park. But there are tracks that are just gorgeous in those movies, And as you said, as far as with this being carried forward, like Michael Giacchino is someone who's sort of doing this in a lot of ways. I can't think of many other composers who I love that would fall into that same sort of camp of people that are really writing iconic film scores that, Alexander Desplat, who wrote a lot of the, Rushmore or the later ones of Moonrise Kingdom and
Grand Budapest, yeah.
Grand Budapest, yeah. I love his music, but it's I'm not hearing it in my head, right? Like the way that I do Williams, it doesn't stick in that same way.
Yeah, I would call myself a big fan of his. I really have enjoyed the first score I remember of his was this movie called Birth with Nicole Kidman.
Really weird movie.
Really weird movie. Really, really subtle, beautiful score. I think it is kind of tuneful. It's certainly something I listen to a lot. But you're right, as far as that sort of leitmotif and things that stick with you. I think Giacchino is a good one, but even he sometimes isn't so thematic. John Powell, who's doing a lot of movies these days. I don't know if you're familiar with him or not. If we're tying it to John Williams, he actually did the score to the Han Solo film.
Oh, wow.
And I thought that was pretty fine. He has been nominated for Academy Awards a couple of times for the How to Train Your Dragon, which again have some very memorable themes. Harry Gregson Williams, I think, is in that same bucket, writing some of the more traditional sounding thematic orchestral music. There's a younger composer named Benjamin Wallfish who's come up and is doing some of that. He's British, and I think spent a lot of his early career overseas, but has come here now. And I think he came up under Zimmer a little bit, but has kind of earned some space in his own right. I first heard his music. There was a tinted puppet production of Peter Pan that came from the West End and toured the United States, and they had a full orchestral score that played live to it. And I heard it, and I was like, this is special. This is classic, great film music. And I certainly followed his career. The same thing with Giacchino. I got on to Michael Giacchino 1998. He actually, I think, wrote the first full orchestral score for a video game, which was the video game adaptation of The Lost World, Jurassic Park. And I think that was in the late 90s. And I remember playing that game on the Sony PlayStation and hearing this live orchestra music. It's they recorded the Northwest Symphonia playing this full score, and it's all original. And I was like, this is special. Is this the future? And of course, it has been. And he did a lot of that work writing music for video games. A lot of other folks have. John Debney is someone who's, again, really popular these days. and I think again writes a lot of that very tuneful stuff. I mean, Alan Silvestri is still working, and he was somebody who was around throughout all of this time. James Horner probably would have still been working had he not passed. But for me, a lot of these folks are just they were really really good, as good as you can be. But there really is just one seat at the top of that mountain, and I think that's John Williams. You know.
Yeah. And there are some newer composers. You've mentioned a few. I actually like Patrick Doyle quite a bit. I don't know what he's doing lately, but he did Henry V, the Kenneth Branagh Henry V, which I loved. Did you ever see that?
Yeah, I love Patrick Doyle. He has dabbled in some of the big tentpole productions. He did the Thor film. He did the fourth Harry Potter movie, Goblet of Fire, which is actually maybe my dark horse favorite Harry Potter soundtrack. My favorite score of his is Sense and Sensibility, the Jane Austen. But yeah, I should have mentioned him, and James Newton Howard too, as someone who's still kind of carrying that flag as well.
Yeah, a big one, James Newton Howard. The one that I was thinking of was Abel Korzeniowski, who I was reminded of by watching a film called Nocturnal Animals. And he did a film, a score to one of the most, I guess, unique films in the history of American film, which is called Escape from Tomorrow. Have you seen that film?
I love that film on so many levels. Maybe not maybe as the sum of its parts. I think there's a lot of really fantastic stuff, but his score is just completely bonkers, when you juxtapose it next to the action that's happening on the screen. And it's just this, I listened to it after, we had a conversation the other day, and again, and I just can't believe how beautiful and lush and kind of has that romantic sort of golden age Hollywood sound at times. It's incredible. Yeah,
and it's if you've not seen the film, it's not the greatest film, as Wade just says, as an end result, but it's got the most unique story of any film, right? So it's a film called Escape from Tomorrow, and it's kind of a surreal horror-ish movie. And it was filmed in guerrilla style on the properties of the Disney Corporation, all the parks, without the permission of Disney. And of course, they couldn't use any of the music, right? Because that would be copyright infringement. Now, a lot of people thought that the filmmakers were going to get sued by Disney. A lot of lawyers thought, well, actually, it falls under like parody, right? That you could it's copyright protected. Disney ultimately didn't sue them because I think they didn't want to give the project any more attention. But so you've got this composer that's writing completely new music during this really screwed up ride through It's a Small World, right? But anyway, great composer. So it's great that there are some of these composers doing this same style of work, and we are celebrating John Williams's 90th birthday this year, right? He'll be 91 in February, which is just around the corner. And I would like to say that I'm getting to learn a little bit more about some of those later Star Wars films that you mentioned, because I'm playing with a group here in Las Vegas called Desert Winds, and we are a really high-level wind orchestra, not many of those around. And we're doing a whole film music concert. So we're doing some Michael Kamen, Robin Hood, which is great. Wizard of Oz, of course, is really popular. And then some of these tracks from the later Star Wars movies. And playing them, I'm just like, wow, I forgot how great this music was. We're lucky in that we have these transcriptions. They're not arrangements. So extremely challenging, and they sound really good. And you wonder about that when you do transcriptions. So looking forward to that concert. If you are in the Las Vegas area, it's October 1. Message me directly if you need details. I will send you the invite. Desert Winds, October 1. And anything else you want to add before we close here, Wages?
No, I want to encourage people to, continue to seek out this film music. I don't want it to sound like we're kind of making any sort of negative assessment of the current state of film music. There's a lot of really spectacular new stuff happening. And there's more diversity in the film music community than there ever has been. One of my favorite composers is composers period, is Shirley Walker. I don't know if you've ever heard that name before or not, but she did a lot of work with Danny Elfman early on. She did a lot of work on John Carpenter's films. She composed a lot of the music and originated the themes for the Batman animated series show. But she did this movie called Memoirs of an Invisible Man that I think came out in the early 90s. And that's the first time a female ever got sole credit for a film score. And that's a very recent movie. So to think that it took that long. So I would encourage folks, especially if you are a fan of somebody like John Williams or some of these other big name composers that we talked about, look out there and hear some other composers. There's Michael Abels, who's African-American, is doing a lot of great work with Jordan Peele in his films. There are a lot of great female film composers, Rachel Portman, Pinar Toprak, Miriam Cutler, who I had a chance to work a little bit with in some circus work I did. She does a lot of documentary films. But folks are getting out now, and I bet you if you ask any one of these people, all of them will mention John Williams as some sort of influence. It would be impossible not to, just because of how much he was a part of all of our musical lives, whether you watch the Olympics broadcast or the NBC Nightly News, any one of these hundreds of films we've talked about, the Boston Pops, he was the composer or the conductor of the Boston Pops for over a decade there. He really paved the way for all of this. And I think that the best thing that we can do too, to keep the film music that we love with these big full orchestras and these giant, orchestral works that accompany our films, is to keep demanding it and listening to it. And, when you have a chance to buy an album or stream an album and, give some money back to the composer or distributor, whatever, please do that. Because that's what makes these films so special. I think we all agree that none of these iconic moments that happen on the screen would be the same without John Williams behind it. And there's a great tradition of folks doing that now. And like I said, there's more diversity and more variety than there ever has been. And folks are taking things in really great directions. But John Williams is no disrespect to your Bernard Herrmann's, Franz Waxman's, Max Steiner's, Jerry Goldsmith. If there are any film score aficionados listening, they're probably upset that we haven't said that name yet. But this is the John Williams show. So
right.
And,
and that's great. Yeah, I think you raised some really good points about access and the fact that this is a very male-dominated field so far, but it's changing. It's a white male-dominated field, but it's changing, right? Nathan's asking, do you guys think it's harder to carry on John Williams' legacy in an era of temp music film scores? What do you think, Wages? I'm not sure what I think temp scores, isn't that where they sort of put something to a movie before it's finished just to see what it's going to look like before they commission the score, or how does that work?
That's exactly what happens there. And you never know what they're going to use for that, whether it's going to be bits of, existing, orchestral music, some of this symphonic stuff we talked about that exists outside of film, or whether it's other film composers. I would imagine a lot of folks over the years have temped with John Williams scores for the film that they want to do. And you've probably heard a lot of sound likes over the years, but I think that we are trending towards a very specific sound, especially for our big kind of tentpole film productions that are happening, our big summer popcorn movies. And, I think too that it's very expensive to pull off the kind of, big orchestral score that you're talking about, just because the personnel is so large. But I think anyone that has sat in one of these movies in a movie theater and had that sound wash over them, that first scrawl at the beginning of Star Wars, or that, flight in front of the moon in E.T., would agree that that's the way it should be. It's the only way to properly augment that. And I would encourage anyone that ever has an opportunity to do so, because this is a big trending thing that we should mention. First of all, if you're anywhere near Las Vegas, go see Michael Manley's concert, hear this music performed live. Second, if an orchestra anywhere near you is doing a live to film production of some motion picture, I don't care what it is, go and see it. That's an amazing thing to see pulled off. It's, even if you just watch the conductor and watch him try to line up everything with, the scrawl and the time code and all, with the film projected behind him, it's an amazing thing. This music was never meant to be played all straight down like that. I think any bass player would agree with you. It's probably a nightmare, and I don't know how some of these folks have pulled it off, but it's an extraordinary feat. It's the best way to hear this music done. It's great for the orchestras. It's great for live cinema. I understand where folks like Scorsese and Spielberg are coming from when they're, disappointed that everything's kind of transitioning to a streaming model. It just diminishes and and takes you out of all of those great things that made film special. But again, hearing this music performed live is really an unparalleled experience. I've had an opportunity to see a number of Williams scores, and I have so much jealousy for you, Michael, going getting to see E.T. live with the New York Phil. Still haven't seen E.T. yet, but Raiders, Star Wars, Harry Potter. That must have been amazing. How was that?
Yeah, it was amazing. And E.T. is, I think, my #1 favorite score. I just think it's great. And you mentioned, and the New York Philharmonic did an amazing job with it. But as you mentioned, like the way film scores are recorded, it's going to be over a week or 2-week period, right? Like there's going to be sessions. I can't imagine that kind of work. It seems like, just walking on a tightrope every day, sitting down, having to nail something that you've never seen before. It's a very specific skill that's in a way different than being an orchestral musician, right? You still have to be very competent and you have to be excellent on your instrument, but it's a very different skill set having to sight read in the studio. But you're right, like nobody intended for this music to be played straight down for 2 hours. So it's amazing when you hear it really, really well done like that. And the New York Philharmonic performing E.T. was a real highlight for me. And, we also touched on the fact that like people say, oh, well, he took this from there and he took this from there. I mean, Howard Hanson, Romantic Symphony, the last movement. Do you know that music at all?
Not necessarily. I probably have to hear it, but yeah.
Okay, yeah. The Howard Hanson. Now, Howard Hanson, American composer, wrote for the concert hall. His Third Symphony, not played as often as it should be, but like you'll listen to the last movement and you'll be like, oh my gosh, this is the flying music from E.T. This is the chase music. And but you know what? Every composer did that. Mozart did that. All composers did that. So I think it just is a testament to John Williams's greatness that he's able to kind of make us think about all these other composers at the same time that we hear him. But you're right. I think there's not a lot of people, and I think it's also a function of the changing way things are working from a business model perspective. And so one of the things that happened when John Williams was writing film scores in the 60s, late 50s, 70s, is that studios, they would hire John Williams. He would just tell them everything that he needed, right? And the studio would hire whatever they needed. They would hire a huge orchestra. Now what they're doing is they're giving a composer a package. They're saying, here's your ball of money, right? And it's only going to be this much. And then you have to pay yourself and hire an orchestra out of it. And I think that has changed the model more than anything. Now, if you're John Williams and you're scoring the 12th Star Wars movie or the 9th Star Wars movie or whatever it is, the studio is not going to say no to you because you're John Williams, right? But for younger composers, I think it's going to be harder for them to get those big orchestras because of the fact that studios don't want to pay for it, right? They're just like, here's your ball of money, you fight it out among yourselves, which is unfortunate because I do think it makes it harder to get these lush, huge orchestras, and you do need that size. Some of these orchestras, like you'll see pictures of people on scoring sessions. I have a lot of scoring friends on my Facebook feed, and they'll be like 5 contrabass trombones or whatever on stage, and you're like, okay, who can afford that, right? Who's and it makes it very hard to replicate then if you're playing it live, because again, the New York Philharmonic is going to have to hire 5 contrabass trombone players or whatever the weird thing is, 17 harps or whatever. But I do think that this is music that should be played live more because it is worthy of the concert hall, in my view. And it's a shame that it isn't played on a program with Strauss and with Wagner and with all of these Rachmaninoff, all these great Romantic composers, because it is an outgrowth, especially Williams, of that world. And it's the equal in my view. So
completely agree. Yeah. And I think that, going to see it humanized like that, when you don't get to really see any of those musicians on the screen, when you see the film, you see almost every other aspect of how that film is made or the product, but there's no visual to that music unless you are able to go and sit in front of an orchestra, even if they just program a song or two by a composer, even if it's not live to film. It's a special experience to get to watch them perform that live and see such a large group in concert like that. We as
Yeah.
musicians, I think, take that for granted sometimes because that's what we do, right? But
Yeah.
even now, I very rarely, and I've done all kinds of pretty, high level, but I very rarely get to sit inside a large ensemble and play music, with a full complement of all the instruments. It just doesn't happen very often. Um, even pit size for a lot of Broadway shows is usually quite small, and without a huge diversity of instruments, represented. I rarely get to play with French horns anymore. So I
Yeah.
just don't see it very often, and it's a shame. And that's why. But I went to a John Williams concert in Alabama a few months ago. I think they had 5 or 6 French horns on stage, something like that. It was insane, and I was like, boy, have I missed this. And I'm
Yeah.
watching this happen live in front of me right now, and I'm experiencing this. And I listen to this music all the time, and I was blown away. I can't imagine just coming in off the street, bearing witness to that both visually and orally, and not coming away changed. So
Yeah. It's like seeing Mahler, right? You see like 8 horns on stage or something.
yeah.
Um, but it's funny. The only things that I can't think that Williams ever did was musical theater or opera. And I actually think he would make an amazing opera composer. I wish he had written an opera, but maybe before he passes on to the next realm, he will write an opera for us. And it's funny you mentioned musical theater and the shrinking orchestras. I think there's a film that is very, very polarizing in the musical community. And I'm going to say it to you, and you're probably going to either smile or scowl, right? So La La Land. And
Okay.
so you're scowling, I can see, right?
Well, let me. I think it's a beautiful film. I love the music of the film. I love all the people involved in it. Um, Emotionally for me, and I love movies, and I'm a heart of my sleeve guy. I'm not afraid to cry at a good commercial. Like I'm very sensitive. That movie just like I feel really really pulled at my heart, and I was left very down when it was over. So I didn't see it again. I didn't recommend it to people, but the movie itself is beautiful. I think it's a gorgeous film. Again, I love all the performances. I love the music in the film, but plot wise, it got me down. So I don't
Yeah.
go back. I feel the same way about like Million Dollar Baby. It's I was so down when that film was over. I just maybe I'm one of those people that needs to have everything wrapped up, happy ending, at the end. But
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I think you're right. It's a very, very down, almost melancholy ending, which I liked. I liked that it wasn't wrapped up neatly, right? But jazz friends think, oh, the jazz is really stupid and rudimentary, or whatever. And then the Broadway people are like, oh my God, the singing is so bad, right? But I actually thought that having the singing not be perfect was part of the film, right? We wanted these people were not Broadway stars, right? It was a film, it's not a Broadway stage, and they're breaking out into song, and they're believable still as who they are, because when we see Ryan Gosling, kind of when he starts, you're like, oh my God, that was terrible. But it's like, well, that's probably how his character would sing, like he's not a singer, he's a jazz pianist or whatever. But what I think was great about the film was it was a Broadway type show. It was a musical with a huge orchestra. The orchestration is what made the movie for me. And then you go from that to sitting in like Wicked in a Broadway house in New York, and you're like, wait, this kind of sucks. And not because the musicians suck. It's just because it's not scored. They're trying to make up for cranking up 2 violins is not going to make it sound like 40 violins, right? Like it's just a different thing. And that's why I think La La Land was just really great. I think I saw it 3 times in the theater, but it's because the score was so well played, and it was well orchestrated for the right number of musicians, and it was just gorgeous. It was just gorgeous to hear.
yeah, something like that's really transporting, especially if you do have any kind of like sentimentality or nostalgia for that kind of old Hollywood way of doing things, with these big epic films, and going to sit in the giant movie house with an overture and intermission of music that was performed, and I think a lot of people would have the chance to experience that. It would mean something. So Yeah, and that's why I think I love a lot of these letters that filmmakers are doing now to that era, you know, and fortunately there are folks making that who have the budget to do it that way, and I think listeners know the difference, you know, even if they can't necessarily articulate it, it's definitely perceived on some level, you know, to have a production like that. And I agree with you, seeing those actors clearly put in the work, you know, to pull off those performances. They put in a lot of training, and I think it was appropriate for what it was. Was the ballet community, did they tear Natalie Portman apart after Black Swan? Or, you know, I mean, what exactly, is that common? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't like Black Swan for other reasons, because it perpetuated the crazy artist myth, right? Like that,
Right.
if you're really good at any performing art, you have to be crazy, right? Shine, another crazy artist myth movie. Anyway, yeah, not a fan of Black Swan for that reason. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing. And people were criticizing the dancing and stuff in La La Land. I'm like, but this is not a Broadway show. It's not meant to be that. It's something else. It's a film, right? And so, but you're right. I think there are some people that are doing this work, and they are kind of like returning. You know, you could say, you know, some of what's going on with Game of Thrones. Although I think there are some really iconic moments in Game of Thrones, but I don't feel the same about Ramin Djawadi as I do John Williams. Although I think Westworld was cool. I think there's some really cool moments in that. But it's a different aesthetic. It's just, you know, it's a different aesthetic. And Hans Zimmer, again, incredibly successful composer, totally different kind of direction he's going in with some of his films. We just hit the hour mark. So I want to say thank you, Wages, for giving me extra time today. This was a great conversation. And I appreciate all of your knowledge that you bring and enthusiasm about film music to this conversation.
Well, my pleasure. Please have me back anytime. If we want to delve into another composer or do John Williams part 2 through 10, whatever you need, I'm your person.
Yeah, there's so many other movies, Schindler's List, Empire of the Sun. We didn't even get to these, right? So I'd love to have you back. And you touched on the Olympic fanfares, right? That's funny. Nathan says, I miss the era of Ghost Singers and Marnie Nixon singing for Natalie Wood in West Side Story. I think the final product was better for it, although Marnie Nixon didn't get credit until later in life. Interesting. I didn't even know that. Wow. You know, that brings to mind, and I haven't seen it, but the Les Mis film they did, where they actually recorded the voices on the set and they didn't dub them in. Apparently it didn't work well for some people. My favorite bad musical movie that I would watch over and over again is either of the Mamma Mia movies. And I just love how bad Pierce Brosnan is, but I just love those movies because they're so fun, right? Like, you're aware of how bad it is and how stupid it is, but it's like really great shots of Grease, and it's a fun time. So, plus you have Cher and Meryl Streep. What more could you need in a movie?
Completely agree. I'm right there with you with Mamma Mia. You know, my fingers gets me every time. That's probably my most played song on the ukulele. So,
well, next time
there's no one listening, right? Wait. Oh no.
Oh, so next time we have Wages on, he is going to serenade us with his version of Mamma Mia on the ukulele, because I want to hear that now.
All right. I'll work it up.
So on that, we went to a really weird direction there, but on that note, we are going to close this episode. I want to thank everybody for watching, for tuning in. And thank you, Wages, for sharing an hour of your life with me and your enthusiasm and knowledge of John Williams.
My pleasure. I'd love to come back anytime and go out and support film music.
Absolutely. See you all soon. Take care.